He is.
He is. He'll be back.
And Julia's going to be late.
Yeah.
Okay. Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone to the October 16th, 2018 Radnor Township School District Curriculum Committee meeting. The first item on the agenda, introductions and administrative remarks. Dr. McQuiggan?
Thank you very much. So just a little preview for our agenda tonight. We're juggling agenda items around to fit everyone's schedules. We're going to be starting tonight with a look at the plan to examine the academic calendar. We will be doing an update tonight on K-12 technology. Mr. Kearney, Dr. Kearney, will be presenting some information on our written language initiative, and then we will also hear the social studies audit report. Looking ahead to November, just to give everyone a preview for planning purposes, on November 13th, we will have our regular board curriculum committee meeting, and at that meeting, we will be devoting the entire time to the adolescent sleep and school start time proposal. And then we have earmarked November 27th, which is the board business meeting, and we're going to move our annual data presentations there from our individual buildings. So that'll happen there as well. We are going to be following up with the technology presentation next month, but I don't know if it's going to be built into one of the curriculum committee meetings, or we might work with finance because we're getting into the numbers to see if that piece could move to finance. Thank you.
All right, and that brings us to public comment. Is there any public comment at this time?
Hello, Judy Sherry, Governor Circle, Newtown Square. First of all, I just had continued questions, some of which appeared on the web online. First question was number 3 from curriculum, which I asked last time, which was why not eliminate heading in soccer in the middle school level, at the middle school level? And the response was PIAA oversees the sport and would make those decisions. So I'm wondering what scientific evidence can the district point to regarding the benefits or harm to middle school students who continue to head balls in soccer? And why does Radnor rely on the PIAA to determine the best practices for its students? And the response to the question I asked about Amplify Science, number 5, continue to have a question, are teachers satisfied that Amplify Science provides the best long-term approach to teaching science? Is it the best foundation for long-term teaching of science? Because it seemed to me that there were a lot of different things added to make it appropriate, and I just wondered about that. Number 6, has the district, this was about Mandarin, which I asked about the format or something, was just told that, my question was, has the district considered offering Mandarin in a different format? The response was, various formats have been considered. The class was offered this year at the high school but did not run due to limited enrollment, which I knew. So, follow-up questions are, will Radnor offer Mandarin following the same successful approach it uses for every other world language? And if not, what ideas does Radnor have to make this a successful program in the future? And another question related to next year, will the district offer more than one watershed class next year? It seems like it's a very popular program. So will it offer more than one? And finally, I'm looking at my notes here. I happened to Google heading balls in soccer, and I don't know, there were so many different articles that came up about it. But my final comment and question, an article in yesterday's paper, which actually a teacher at the last meeting kind of referred to this, stated that more schools are turning away from requiring SAT scores. Since 2013, 130 schools made SAT and ACT scores optional. for a total of more than 1,000 schools that have it now as optional. So, and this is the article. You can all find it online, I'm sure. How will this trend change or impact Radnor's curriculum? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sherry. Is there any other public comment?
Good evening. Cindy Spurtle, 106 Valley Forge Terrace, Wayne. I have a comment on the posted answers to the curriculum from August, and then also one from the minutes on another answer to a question. The organizational chart I'd asked about job descriptions. Would job descriptions be given to the public? And the answer was that the job descriptions, when the organizational chart was written, were passed or presented to the board in July. And then the new organizational chart was completed in August, and there were a couple new positions. So if the board has the job descriptions for the organizational chart, could they be released so the public could read what the positions? There are some, it went from assistant principal to responsibilities for some of the teachers or administration in the high school rather than assistant principals in the schools, not the high school. Coming to this week, the minutes, I had asked a question about the full-day kindergarten cost, and the answer that was given online was to look at watch the video of the August curriculum meeting, which I did. And my question was the annual cost, additional cost for full-day kindergarten to our budget, and that was not answered in the video. There were initial startup costs that were given during that meeting, if I remember correctly. Then I had a question on, for this week's agenda, on the, just curious on the clubs that were presented, and there are no applications included. Will the applications be included when the final vote is taken at the business meetings? But there weren't for this, so I was curious for the opioid crisis club, because it's such an important topic. Does the administrative liaison that is assigned to that club have the proper credentials to help the students? In other words, a medical background or counseling background that will be assigned to work with these students, since it's so important. Also curious about three other clubs: Product Project, Radnor Activism, and Thirst Project. Those were three. Couldn't quite figure out what they were. Hoping that the application will give more insight into exactly what those clubs are. And now tonight's discussion on the counseling plan for the K through 12, the 339 plan, which I believe is you're going to be going in depth into. Is there a timeline for implementation if the plan is improved? There was no timeline in the information that was attached. On the writing initiative, the new program, is this brand new to the district, or is this further enhancement of a current writing program that is being presented at this time? Technology, I understand, is going to be at another meeting. Dr. McQuiggan, not to be discussed tonight. I had a few questions on the technology. One was for the Chromebook. I don't remember, and I may have missed the meeting where it was announced that the middle school will be getting, for sure, Chromebooks. I know that was the suggestion. And I noticed that there is there'll be a trial for the Chromebook in the middle school, which I think is a very good idea. And then once again, in the next steps that are going to be taken for this expansion, K through 12, is there a timeline, especially for the report on the Chromebook pilot? And also the teacher proficiency expectations, a timeline included with that for future reference. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Spurtle. Is there any other public comment? All right, seeing none. we're moving the agenda items around? Is that, or do you
So
want to do?
we can start with the board action items?
Yeah,
Is
let's
that
do the
okay?
action items.
Okay, so I just want to give some clarification about clubs. So we have two categories of clubs when we approve clubs. One is clubs that are continuing, and for a club that is continuing, that means that an application has been done in the past and approved by the board. So this club is just continuing this year, most likely with a new teacher representative or new student officers or something along those lines. So I don't have any additional information on the opioid crisis because that was board approved, probably a year ago or 2 years ago. But I can give you a little additional information. The new clubs, you'll see the list there, Happy Paws and Head and Heart and whatnot. The Product Project is a group of students collecting feminine hygiene products for a food pantry. And the Thirst Project is a group of students working on healthy water and crisis around communities having access to healthy water. And we will have the complete applications posted for the full board meeting. So the recurring clubs, we just recognize for the purpose of insurance, but the ones that are new, we ask that we would move those to the board agenda to have those approved at the business meeting. Overnight student trips, they're included with the chart. We hope you find the chart self-explanatory. We're trying to be more consistent in what we refer to things as when we talk about district costs or district expenses. And then, Jim, are you going to talk about the textbook adoption, or we're just, okay. All right. And then the informational items. So the school counseling plan, you'll see that the review that is in your packet reminds us of the fact that we had Dr. Kane here at the Board Curriculum Committee meeting in the spring, and then we felt that there was a need to share additional information, so we had an information session as a follow-up. That was also taped, and that's recorded and posted online if anyone wants to watch that. It's several of our counselors from across the district talking in great detail about the 339 plan. The plan itself, which is actually called the school counseling plan, so we're going to try to refer to it as the school counseling plan, although we got used to calling it the 339. It actually is, there's a lot to it beyond just the 339 piece. So it is the school counseling plan. The complete plan is posted online for your review, and then when we come together next month, I am going to be asking you to move the school counseling plan to the business meeting agenda for approval. So this is just a reminder that if you still have questions about it or you still want to spend time taking a look at it, between now and next month would be a good time to do that. So as far as a timeline for the plan, we were required, it was sort of one of those build the airplane while it's flying, we were required to begin pieces of that plan last year even as we were writing it. So as you knew, we were collecting 2 artifacts per student. So the timeline is now. The timeline is here. Yes, and it's fully in effect this year. So the other thing that's unique about this plan is, unlike many other plans that we've had to submit to the state, this is really a living and breathing plan, and every year we are required to go back into the plan to make some additional changes, to put some updates in. So it will be ebbing and flowing as we move through the years. Our artifacts, can change and evolve as time goes by, but it does have to be board approved, and our timeline for that would be next month at the November meeting. And then Dr. Abarczyk, you can ask. You can ask.
Thank you. We have in here, it says they developed the plan 17 and 18.
Throughout
right,
the year.
For
Last year.
18 and 19, correct?
Well, it actually also started in 17-18 because last year we had to collect 2 artifacts.
Okay, so this one here that we're moving forward, how far does that go?
Well, it's supposed to be an ongoing plan. So it's an ongoing plan that will have annual updates. So it has an unlimited life expectancy.
Okay.
As long as we review it every year, it should be in good shape.
So the one that we're pushing forward, if we're going to take Kevin's name off of it?
Well, he was one of the developers of the plan.
But is he going to be leading it?
No.
Who's going to be
That's
leading?
my question.
You're right. So
Be leading the new plan. We could just put, do we have a?
So Kelly Murray is going to be, well, we're moving school counseling. over to the curriculum department, because one of the things that was brought to our attention as we were working on the plan is that school counseling and wellness and all those pieces are much more closely aligned now with curriculum instruction than they are with special education and student services. So the school counselors, the wellness goal, and the school counseling plan are all going to be moved to Dr. Murray, so she can oversee those pieces that are all connected together as part of curriculum.
So she'll be overseeing the 339.
She has already met with the counselors several times, yes.
All right, thank you.
Okay? And then there's one more update in your packet for you around the elementary progress report. So with our move to Math in Focus, there was a need to go back and take a look specifically at the mathematics portion of the progress report, so it aligns more closely with what students are doing in the new math program. So parents will see some updates this fall when the report card comes out, and teachers are looking forward to the opportunity to be able to more closely translate what they're doing in the classroom with the types of progress they're reporting to parents at the end of the marking period.
Can I just ask another question? This has to do with the 339 plan and then the new state law that may come into existence about the keystones. And how are those two flowing together? Because the 339 has to do with the graduation of our students, and also so does the Keystone bill that will then become a law. And how's that being integrated into the discussion with the 339 plan?
Well, I think what the school counseling plan tells us is that we're charged with helping students find the path that's most appropriate for them, and with the legislation that we're hearing more about today and hopefully will be passed and come to fruition, this is going to give us an opportunity to make those paths even more personalized for students. So for students whom an SAT or a PSAT or whatnot is appropriate, we're going to have that option in that pathway. And for students whom getting full-time employment is the best path for them, they're going to be able to meet their requirements using that type of a path. So I think it's just going to open up more avenues for us to personalize things rather than kind of this one-size-fits-all.
But with that, does that then go under Dr. Murray?
The graduation requirements?
Yeah, does that then become part of the 339?
You mean the pathways? It could become part of the 339.
Right.
It could be. It could become one of students' artifacts, because an artifact, for instance, one of the artifacts that's acceptable is something like a college application, and being accepted into a four-year college is now one of the criteria that can be used.
Okay. All right. Good. Thank you.
Thanks.
Can I ask one quick question?
Sure.
Just because we breezed through it so quickly, I thought we were going to stop at each one. I think Ms. Spurtle asked, and I just out of curiosity, Radnor Activism, do you have any more information on that club?
I do believe I do.
Okay.
This club came forward last year. Thank you for the reminder. I thought I pulled them all up.
Yeah, I know there are lots of questions.
It came forward last year, and then we had some additional questions about it. It's fairly general, but I do have it here. No, I just looked at it. Happy pause. Activism. To inform and encourage students of the Radnor community to take action on current issues that they feel passionate about. The Radnor Activism Club will educate students about the topics, allowing them to form their own opinions so they all feel inclined to get involved. Okay. And the Jenny O'Rourke is the faculty sponsor, and it was brought forward by students Grace South and Audrey Margolis.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I skipped an agenda item. We need to just backtrack for a minute and do the approval of the September 11th minutes. So committee, are there any comments? Okay. Student? So the minutes stand as written. Okay. So now let's jump back. You wanted to do the calendar
Yes,
first?
please.
Okay.
So we are going to invite Dr. Kent up from the middle school. Doug Kent is going to be leading our priority action item this year, where we're going to be taking a look at the academic calendar and how we plan the calendar each year. And the purpose of tonight's presentation is just to give you an idea of the process that's going to be used to take a look at the calendar.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. Our first meeting actually is tomorrow, and we're very excited about it. We have two main goals that the committee will look at, and that is number one, making recommendations to the district administrations for next year's instructional calendar, and then putting together a list that can be reviewed yearly as far as things that can or should be considered as future calendars are being put together. The intent is not that this is a committee that's going to meet every year, but that we put work in this year with 4 planned meetings and have recommendations to district administration heading into Thanksgiving, so then things can begin to take shape as far as next year's calendar. So we're going to be really using tomorrow's meeting to do a lot of education as far as our committee and what requirements are from the state as far as number of hours and number of days and you know, things that we can't control, you know, PSSA testing, Keystone testing, AP testing, you know, so there's a lot of things that we can control, but also others that we cannot. And really just having conversations, looking at what some other districts do, looking at other district calendars, looking at DCIU, CCIU calendars, and seeing what else is out there, how other people work their calendar. You know, one thing we've been looking at also is number of emergency days. So we took over the last 10 years, we averaged 3.3 emergency days over that 10-year span. So looking at that, right, there were 2 hurricane days in there for Sandy. So, but looking at that and that number over 10 years and see what recommendations we might make into how many we want to build into the calendar. And also we were curious if there's anything that the committee in particular would like us to look at as well.
All right, well, so I have a request for that committee. I guess you're going to be chairing it or whatever. So we did a very extensive study of this. And I thought it was like 4 years ago, but Dr. McQuiggan reminded me like maybe it was more like 7. But as part of that, they did surveys of parents, students, teachers, and so we got very robust data back. And I know some of the people in the district have changed, but there were things that came out of that I don't think have changed. So I just want to make sure that you use, you know, that was something we put a lot of effort into obtaining. And so just so that you can use that as a starting point to have that information.
Thank you. I'll reach out to Dr. McQuiggan for that. Thank you.
Are you thinking about doing a new survey, a fresh survey?
We definitely have talked about that. And, you know, that's something as a committee we will talk about, and again, we're making recommendations to move to the district administration, so that certainly is something that we are going to consider.
I know there's a lot of talk about possibly making a meaningful move with spring break. I'd like to see that looked at. I have no dog in the fight. I don't know what the answer is. I'm just saying, I know a lot of people would like to see that looked at, and I know a lot of people who wouldn't, but also, I just have a question. The RTSD parents, are they PTO designees or are they active officers from each school?
Mrs. Bruns, who oversees PTO, solicited names and turned those around to us.
Okay.
And as well, Mrs. Dunn and Mr. Miller will be joining us representing the board. And we're very grateful for that. I apologize, Ms. Solomon.
Sarah Dunn and Mike Miller will be the board reps to complete that list of committee members.
Since you asked a question about what we might be interested in, one of the things that we discussed, the liaison with the Special Education Committee, and that was to look into the possibility of more, maybe a professional development day before school starts, which would include the special education teachers that would also meet with the parents to give them an opportunity to meet the teacher that's going to work with their children, to give them a little more of insight. We have talked about this similar to a parent institute, something that we could have, for instance, you could call it whatever you want to, Special Education 101, where we would sit with the parents and let them know these are the things that we offer. We have a fantastic program here. If you do see something that you need to be addressed, here's where it goes, here's who you talk to. This is an opportunity for parents to talk to teachers almost in a one-on-one. That's not rushed. Okay, and I understand that it may cost money, but I think we can take this opportunity to spend a little bit of money and really reap some really big rewards, because as a teacher, it just makes your job so much more easier and more productive and more effective if you begin to know your kids even before they come in. Okay, so that's something that I would like to throw out there. And that's something that came from the Special Education Committee. We had a meeting last week, so just throwing that out there.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm on the committee, but I think it's worth mentioning. I know that we have a significant population in the district that uses our buses for transportation. I think that's something that we should make sure we address as part of the calendar committee, because I think changes to that will affect some of those schools potentially.
You mean non-public?
Non-public schools, yeah. Sorry.
Thank you. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much for taking that on.
Okay, we're going to invite Dr. McCook to join us, and we're going to talk about technology again. Very excited to chat tonight because while all last year we talked about things that were in the future, now we're able to talk from some real life experiences, things that are actually happening in the district, and a very complex plan finally taking shape and making a difference for our students. So this is a kind of a takeoff on a presentation we did for every one of our teacher groups across the district at the beginning of the year, just to give everyone an update on where we are, where we've been. Those folks who were on the committee obviously knew a lot more information, but we wanted to make sure everyone was starting out the beginning of the year with a basic understanding of why we're making some of the changes we have. So as you know, I know we followed quite closely the look at the high school we did, where we looked at the iPads and talked to students and did device experiences and met throughout the year. I just wanted to give you an update on some of the work that followed that. So the natural next step to that was to begin to look with our K-8 teachers at how those goals that we established for the high school impact students from kindergarten through 8th grade. So we gathered together a group of K-12 teachers who worked as a K-12 group and also as a K-8 group over the summer to accomplish a couple of tasks. One of the things that they did was they mapped the goals back to kindergarten. So if our plan at the high school was to have students collaborating and being creative and whatnot using devices, where did that need to start and what did it look like at the various grade levels? They also completed a K-8 device study, so similar to what we did at the high school. We had folks come in from the Chester County Intermediate Unit, brought a variety of devices. We were actually in this room. We made some plus and minus charts and talked about the types of things that teachers do in the classroom at the different grade levels and what was happening there. The other thing those teachers did, and it was in your packet, there's a little snapshot of it in the PowerPoint, but the last couple pages of the board packet outline the K-12 expectations for teachers. One of the goals that we came up with at the high school that we eventually brought back to kindergarten was that we really felt that there was a need to have some type of consistent expectation for kind of a minimum bar. What is it that all students are going to be able to do? What is it that all teachers are going to be able to do? And we did finish the teacher piece this summer, so we have that up and running for teachers. The piece that we haven't begun yet, because it's actually our goal for next year, is the student piece. So we do still have a lot of work to do regarding making decisions about what is it that we want students to know and be able to do with technology from kindergarten through 12th grade. So we did a lot of that with high school, but we haven't done as much of that yet at the elementary and the middle school levels. Our goals, you'll recognize them from before, very similar. We were glad to see that the K-8 committee was happy with the goals and felt that they applied as well to kindergarten through 8th grade. So we basically just modified the language from each of the high school goals so that they apply through kindergarten through 12th grade. And we'll talk a little bit about a few of them that Byron and I are going to highlight today. So when we started putting Goal 2 in place this year, some of the things that you already see across our schools, we have rolled over to Office 2016, Office 365. So our teachers are using components of that for their own personal use, for their own professional use, and also with their students. So they are using Office 365 when they create documents. They are copying their H drive onto OneDrive, so we're moving our files into the cloud. This is something we focused on the first few days of school. And then we've also set up consistent expectations for Schoology. So some of the feedback we got during our surveys and focus groups last year were things like, we really love Schoology, it's really great, but we wish everyone used it so that when we went on the calendar, we could see all of our assignments and not just 1 or 2 of them. So we have those expectations in place from grades 4 to 12. As far as Schoology goes, we've started out with, again, some minimum expectations. So in grades 4 through 12, teachers are posting on the calendar, so students can log on to the calendar and see their assignments. And then also from kindergarten to 3rd grade, we have parents creating accounts so that they begin to become accustomed to the idea of receiving information through Schoology, logging on to Schoology, creating an account where they can see multiple children kind of in a one-stop shopping. We don't have a lot of expectations beyond those basic pieces of communicating updates and posting things on the calendar. So I think some of the feedback we've gotten from like our PTO group is, okay, I logged on, but like what's going to happen now? What am I supposed to be looking at? So we're just at the beginning stages. So the idea now is to have an account, be able to log on, know where Schoology is, start to use the calendar. There are thousands of features in Schoology. Some of our teachers are using loads of them and aren't, they're barely tapping into all the different functionalities of it. And others are just posting homework on the calendar. So, as we start to work towards more professional development, you'll see more of an enhancement with those pieces because we have some folks giving quizzes on it and grading things and collaborating. And again, other folks just using the calendar. So stay tuned at the family engagement night. We are going to be having some sessions on Schoology, so parents will be able to come and see like the types of things that they can expect to see in the future with Schoology and the types of things their students are doing in school with Schoology as well. I showed you the tiered growth. As far as timelines, I know there was a question at the beginning about what's our timeline for implementing these. When we created the expectations for teachers as far as what we want everyone to be able to do with technology, we created them specifically in tiers. We call them tiers and not years because we really want to work with the evolution of our staff. So if Tier 1 takes a year and Tier 2 takes 2 years, we're going to continue to monitor it and decide what type of support we need as we move through it. But basically, Tier 1 really outlines the types of things we would want a brand new teacher to learn. So if we hired a new teacher tomorrow, we'd want them to be able to log on to email, to create their Schoology account, some of those basics. And then as you look through the tiers, it becomes more sophisticated use of Office 365, more sophisticated use of Schoology, and some of those different features. So we're still working on how folks will move through them, and obviously across the district, we already have teachers that are at all 4 tiers. Although we do not have our expectations mapped out yet for students, because of some of the changes we've made with technology, there have been changes for our students as well. Our students are using Office 365, so if they log on to Word or they store a file in district, they are using Office 365 and they do have access to their own OneDrive, so they can store things in the cloud and have access to them at home and those types of things. Obviously, they're using Schoology in grades 4 through 12, and that's a place where they can access their homework. Fourth and fifth graders for this year are still using their assignment books. They're still writing their things down, but the teachers will be attaching things and whatnot in Schoology. So if students leave their assignment book at home or leave it at school, they'll have some alternate sources for pulling that information. We're going to talk a little bit about Chromebooks later on, so I'm going to skip over that for right now. As far as professional development, we've had a great deal of support in the beginning of the year, and we just finished a needs assessment with all of our teachers to find out kind of where they are with Tier 1. We have another in-service day coming up on November 6th, so we want to make sure that's targeted at helping to fill in any of those remaining gaps. So we've had our in-service days. The high school has their professional learning communities running, and some of those are focused around technology. We've really worked hard to get our building techs involved, not just on the technical aspect, but also really participating with our teachers in the training so that they can learn Schoology and they're able to troubleshoot as well. We have a tech liaison in every building. We have a teacher that comes forward each year and volunteers to be kind of the tech expert in the building. Byron and I meet with them once a month, and they're there kind of on the spot to help teachers out with those types of support. We still have our technology coach, Kate McKenna, who's been with us for several years. She's focusing specifically on K-8 this year, and also playing a big role with the Chromebooks as well. We did a lot of training this summer with our administrators. We had them in for a couple days. We did OneNote and Class Notebook and Office 365 and all those types of things. And then obviously we have a lot of resources across our building with teachers who have various levels of expertise with technology. So the big thing we're going to talk about today as we work towards the financial piece is Goal 4, which talked about reducing the number of devices. We've talked about this before. We have a large and old inventory of devices. There's some charts in there that Byron's going to go over with you. From our audit of the wireless network, we know that this is having an impact on how well our network runs and how well our students are able to connect their wireless devices. We also know that the number of devices that we have on hand right now, fiscally, we would not be able to develop a refresh cycle for that number of devices. There are just too many of them. Many laptops, $800–900 a piece, and just, thousands of pieces of equipment. So some of the work that we did this summer was to talk with teachers K-8 about how they use technology. And we already knew that one of our missing links was kind of those consistent expectations, K-8 for technology. There's a lot of choice with technology, but our teachers are accustomed to having access to iPads and right now laptops. So for those that use technology regularly, it's very easy for them to get carts of machines or go to labs or carts of iPads, things like that. So having access to devices as early as kindergarten is very common in our district and an expectation that our teachers count on. We looked at a lot of different devices, and the K-2 teachers really agreed that their focus with devices is around collaboration and the creativity piece. We don't have teachers in kindergarten and first grade, plopping everyone behind a laptop and that type of thing. It's more multiple students around one device, working on some type of a project or some type of interactive piece. Our teachers from 3 to 8, their interests were around multi-use devices. They wanted the touch screen, they wanted the camera, but they wanted the keyboard, and then durability is an issue, particularly for our elementary and middle school people. We talked a long time about students picking off keys and rearranging them in different orders so that those who look at the keys can't type very well, or the keys just start to fall off. So durability was a big deal in looking at devices, and then of course being flexible. So this is how we got to the point at the end where we started looking specifically at the Chromebooks, and I know Byron has a couple with him today. The one piece about our refresh cycle is as we looked at this kind of current state of affairs, we want to get to a place with a refresh cycle where we don't ever again end up where we are now with too many pieces of equipment that are too old. And the second piece is we want our students and our teachers to have quality devices to work with. I know I've told you this before, but some of our laptops, I've timed them in the classroom. It takes 8 minutes to boot up a machine. And when you have a class that's 42 minutes long, 8 minutes is a long time. So another reason why they were excited about the Chromebooks. So Byron's going to talk a little bit about kind of our current status as far as the bar graphs that you have there in your packet, and then we'll circle back around and talk a little bit more about Chromebooks.
Thank you, Marie. Thank you. What you have here before you is a breakdown of the inventory that we have by each building. And, as you can see, the breakdown shows you the devices that are allocated for students, for staff, and for teachers. And what we did was we put it together in a way that you could see what the device acquisitions were by year. And it goes back, pretty much over the last 8 to 10 years or so. What you'll notice is that not much technology has been purchased in the last 2 years, and the reason for that was because we knew we were going into this time where we needed to sort of reassess the acquisition of technology, how it was used, and how it would be set up, deployed to support teaching and learning, and to ultimately support the curriculum. So, what you'll notice at the elementary level, you see Wayne Elementary, Ithan, and Radnor. You'll notice that most of the technology that was purchased for students goes back about 3 to 4 years. That technology was acquired pretty much with a different type of a game plan. That game plan in those days was to try to continue to have equity between the grade levels. So maybe like the grade 3 was targeted one year, and the next year grade 5 was targeted, so that the curriculum could be supported in a way that had equity across the entire district. As we move forward, as Maureen mentioned earlier, one of the things that you'll notice is that a lot of our equipment is quite old. We've kept it running. We've done that by replacing hard drives, batteries, power supplies to keep the machines running. What we did notice earlier this year when we completed the wireless assessment is that due to the age of some of this equipment, that it is difficult for that equipment to maintain a seamless wireless connection because it's not communicating at the rapid pace as our new wireless infrastructure is actually offering us. So that creates another challenge. All right, so in addition to that, when you look at the numbers, there's a significant amount of equipment at each building. Our goal is to reduce this number of equipment, and have it in a way so that we can not only support teaching and learning, but also to make sure that the technology is going to be available to students where they need it and when they need it to support what's happening within the classrooms. If you go over to the last slide, I guess it would be on your page 8, it looks at the whole district perspective and what we look like with regard to our technology inventory. So again, it shows that not much has been purchased in the last 2 years, and that the majority of the equipment is going to be falling in around a 4 to 5 year period, and so it's really getting close to the end of its useful life. We've pushed this equipment way past its useful life as it is now, and it becomes a really natural time for us to look at some type of a refresh. And so that's one of the reasons why we wanted to highlight what we look like inventory-wise with the technology that we're using. Maureen mentioned earlier about Chromebooks. Would you like for me to go over into it? Okay, yeah.
Great.
I did bring a couple samples with me. I'm just going to pass them around. These are the Chromebooks that we purchased this year to run the pilot program at Radnor Middle School. Now, we saw these Chromebooks out at the International Society for Technology and Education conference, and we were actually on a hunt to try to find a nice, durable device. As you heard earlier, our students sometimes enjoy the opportunity of rearranging keys and and doing other things like that. These Chromebooks are made by Dell. They are very sturdy. They have been tested. The keys cannot be plucked off. So far, at least, I haven't been able to pluck them off. And they actually has been tested, drop tested, pressure tested with, even a truck running over them, and they still continue to work.
Water?
Yeah, they are somewhat waterproof, although I would not suggest submerging them in water, but they are somewhat waterproof as well. One of the other good things about them, if you take one of the machines, you can flip it all the way backwards. It turns into an actual tablet. It's an actual touch screen as well, too. And when you flip it over into the tablet, the keyboard becomes disabled, and then it works as an actual tablet where you can use a stylus. There's two cameras on this. There's what we call the world-facing camera, which is on the tablet side. And then when it's flipped up into the laptop mode, it's got another camera that's set up so that if you're doing like Skyping or video conferencing, you can be able to participate that way too. Battery life runs about 10 hours, so it can usually get through a full day. Take a selfie. So you can certainly get through a full school day. It's got the new USB-C charging, which charges it pretty rapidly, and so we've essentially, knowing that we needed to have the iPads that were going to be needed for the incoming ninth graders this year at Radnor High School, we were able to move the existing iPads that we had over at the middle school, the majority of them, over to the high school to fulfill the need that the ninth graders had. And for actually less money, instead of buying the new iPads, we're able to engage in this pilot. So far, so good. I sort of judge how things are working by the number of calls I get, and there haven't been many calls at all about these machines. They've been holding up pretty well. They seem to adapt very well to the software needs that we have. As you can see, I think I've logged into both of those machines, and I think I put board docs up on one, and I think there's other applications that are there, like Think Central, My HRW, and so on. So far, so good. They've been performing pretty well. And so, we just wanted to give you an opportunity to touch and feel and see the technology itself.
So I know there was a question asked about the Chromebooks. So, we have had this moratorium on purchasing new devices because we were in the midst of a study. And we've talked about this before, the fact remains, we have students in our schools coming to learn who need things. So it really worked out for us in that we were in need of the iPads for the ninth grade class this year to hit that gap year before the full service workstations come in at the high school. And at the same time, because our science curriculum really depends on the use of a device, and it had to be a reliable device, it offered us an opportunity to put a pilot in place at the middle school with the Chromebooks. So it met that need that we had at the middle school. It freed up those iPads to come to the high school. And from what I've seen so far this year, I think they've been going over really well. Many times when I see students use them, they tend to use them kind of in that easel position, which are some of the unique features of the fact that it flips all the way around. Not available with all Chromebooks. Right. So you'll see up in one of the last slides what we're looking at this year is our Chromebook pilot. We still have the Chromebooks in carts. It's not one-to-one. They're in carts in science classes, so they're portable. They can be shared. They can be moved to another classroom. We have a few additional carts there in sixth grade. Sixth grade at the middle school had about the oldest devices in the district, and since we had them for science, we added a couple additional carts to sixth grade so those teachers can start to dabble with them as well. And then we're going to have two elementary pilots going on. One is going to go on at Radnor Elementary School because that is the place where we've had the most challenge with our wireless, where teachers complain the most about being able to connect to the network. So we're going to have one pilot there, and then we're going to have one pilot at Wayne Elementary School in a wellness classroom. So we'll have an opportunity to see a cart of Chromebooks with a special area teacher, someone working in an area other than a classroom. So I think that's going to give us a nice picture of how they fit into our curriculum. So all of that being said, we have a refresh proposal, and Byron has actually mapped out the numbers, I think, for the next 9 years. That we were going to take a look at them tonight, but we had a lot of things on the agenda tonight. So we can take a look at year by year by year what everything would cost. But the refresh proposal that we're looking at right now is to refresh the iPads for K-2 at a ratio in carts so that teachers would be able to use them in their classroom. Typically, what our teachers look for is having one iPad per 2 students, so they don't bring 25 iPads into kindergarten and give one to everyone. They usually get a 10-pack. They expressed interest in maybe having available 11 or 12 for when there's 22 students or 23 students in a class. We're looking at Chromebooks for grades 3 to 8 on a 3-year refresh cycle. And again, they would be in carts and they would be able to be moved from room to room. We still need to have more conversations about how many carts would be required so that we could have the level of access that we need. And really, that's going to be aligned to what our student expectations are going to be. So if we're doing a lot with technology in all classrooms, we'll need access to more carts than if the expectations are more minimal. And then we've already talked before about the full service workstation for our students at the high school in 9th to 12th. So as I mentioned at the beginning, one of the scenarios we were working up is, if we took all the devices we had right now and put them on a refresh cycle and said, well, every 4 or 5 years, we're going to make sure everything comes in new, we'd be well over $1 million, just not sustainable in any way, shape, or form. But the cost proposal that Byron has ready to share next month looks like we're going to experience a cost savings of around $200,000. So that would mean, students would have devices that were 3 or 4 years old in their hands at all times, no more than 3 or 4 years old. We'd have a variety of devices as students evolved through the grade levels, so they'd get iPad experience, they'd get Chromebook experience, and then they'd move to the full-service laptop. And we would still be able to reduce our technology budget. Byron, you want to add anything to the money part?
No, just to say that, when we look at the historic spending, and that's where we're anticipating the savings to come from, if we look at this new model, what we're projecting is that we could save approximately $200,000 a year, in addition to reducing the numbers and the pieces of technology that we have at the same time, but also having an amount of technology that's adequate enough to support teaching and learning.
All right, and on the last slide, there's just a few notes about some of our next steps. So as far as our full committee update, we do still need to go back to our full committee, report out on our Chromebook pilot, talk a little bit more about some of the work that was done over the summer, and about our ongoing work with the refresh cycle. As far as the school-based work or the teacher-based work, we have a lot of work to do with those K-12 expectations for students, and much of that is going to drive the level of access, the number of carts, those types of things. And then we also have our goal 5 around healthy use of technology, which really is coming at a perfect time because now we're moving into our wellness goal. So those pieces will fit together well. Byron and I will be monitoring, the success of the Chromebook pilot, collecting some data there, and then we'd also like to share. Byron's put together 9 years worth of budget forecasting regarding what this would look like long term, and either talk about that here or maybe at finance as we move into budget season this year. I think that's it.
Okay. Does anyone have questions? Where should we start? Could I just ask a clarifying, this is sort of off topic. You mentioned the Schoology, and just refresh my memory. We moved off of IEP Writer, and is Schoology what we're using for that piece, or what technology did we move to?
Schoology is our learning management system.
Okay, so it's not
So that's where teachers can post assignments, they can have discussion boards, they can post the homework, students can download assignments if teachers put up attachments. Now that we have Office 365, there are a lot of features where Office 365 can work together with Schoology. It interfaces with a couple different products.
So where did we put the IEP piece?
Right. What we did was we moved from IEP Plus, which was a former SunGuard product, to Power School Special Education. The reason for that is that IEP Plus is scheduled to, it's actually scheduled for end of life, probably within like the next year or two.
Okay. Thank you. I know that was off
You're
topic.
welcome.
That's okay.
And when you're saying a $200,000 savings, just explain again, savings of what? If we were to do a full refresh cycle, what is it savings of?
We'll show next month. If you look historically, what our spending has been like over like the last 8 years or so on average. You know, we are anticipating that we would be able to reduce those purchases, and that's just looking at two cost centers. That's what we call new equipment and replacement equipment. Just those within those two cost centers, that we would be estimating to save about, on average, $200,000 per year moving forward, over looking at the average of going backwards over the last 7 or 8 years of spending. You know, because, and there are a couple of factors that play into this. One is that the technology has changed. You know, we're looking at devices that won't cost nearly as much. You know, the other factor is that the cost of ownership should also come down as well too. You know, whereas historically, you know, you had to purchase a lot of accessories like in software and that kind of thing. You know, while we still have software costs, you know, what we try to factor in when we make acquisitions now, you know, for technology is what is this total cost of ownership? You know, how much does this one device really cost? And you know, with the Chromebooks, you know, there are basically, it's the cost of the device, it's the Chrome OS, and then we have a management software that we put on it. That's about it. And everything else is web-based, so it makes it much easier, you know, to forecast what the cost would be. Now, no one knows what might happen later on in the future. I mean, with any technology, you know, the manufacturers, you know, be it the hardware manufacturers or the software manufacturers may decide to change their model, but based on what we know now, that's what those estimates were made on, you know, with the current data that we have.
Yeah. All right, thank you. Yeah, go ahead,
Just
Mr.
add to
Madden.
that. Looking at it from one of my former colleagues, Rich Booker.
Yes.
Okay, so basically what you're saying is we're not going to spend as much.
Right. That's correct, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, on average of what we spent over like the last 8 years, if we average that cost.
Exactly. So sometimes the word savings is used differently.
Sure.
Okay, so we're just not going to spend as much.
That's a good point.
Which is good.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. But we're not going to end up with $200,000 any place to spend someplace else. Or are we?
Well, it depends on how we budget.
Depends
I
on,
guess.
how the budget is set up. I mean,
it
this year,
is
if we
it
implemented it
budgeted
this year, it sounds
for-
like.
We're not planning on spending that 200,000, but somebody
Yeah,
else
I'm not,
might be.
but,
Okay, I just want to make sure that we
could,
understand that. We're just not spending. We're not, yeah. Okay, thank you.
okay,
I
thanks.
have a question. I'm looking at these charts, and it's showing the elementary schools and what we acquired over the last 9 years, 11 years, 14 years in devices. And if you were to look at this without knowing anything else, you'd say, wow, one school has, you know, more than one device per child, plenty, you know, for an extra sibling here and there. One school has, I'm guessing, 5 out of 6, you know, 5 kids out of 6 have a device, and at another school it's even lower than that. Is this a meaningful disparity? Do we need to worry about evening it out? You know, what is in day-to-day practice, does it matter?
That's a good question. I think most of this has been driven over the enrollment data over the years as well. And, you know, I think also, like, when you look at the total number of student devices, you know, it comes pretty close to, and in many cases exceeds the number of students. But, you know, what is different is, you know, for the most part, you know, you see the purchases aren't necessarily even. They haven't necessarily been even historically. And I think it's because grade levels have been targeted, you know, as compared to looking at, you know, at a whole building. You know, so where you may have like a bubble of students in the enrollment coming through in one particular grade level, that effect may be different between buildings when you're looking at acquiring the number of pieces of technology that's needed to support that grade level. So I think that's what you're probably seeing, that there are areas where it's not exactly even, but I think it was driven by what the need was by the number of students at the time.
But I think Julia's point, and I spotted it too, is that there are significantly more devices at Wayne and Ithan. Ithan has a much smaller population than Radnor Elementary, and Radnor Elementary doesn't even have a 1-to-1 ratio if they've only got 597 devices. So my question was, maybe there are devices that were purchased by PTOs?
Well, a lot of it is,
Possible.
it's teacher participation in the ACTS program.
Right.
So the way a lot of our technology was distributed in the past was if a teacher decided to volunteer and participate in intensive professional development, they were given a class pack of iPads or a cart of laptops or a smart board or things like that. So, and I do know that we had many teachers from Ethan participating in those programs. So that could cause some of that. But our refresh cycle is not dependent on that.
Okay.
The refresh cycle is dependent on the number of students in the building and the number of carts we need for everyone to have the access that's required at those grade levels.
One of the things we're trying to develop, K to 12, and which we did 9 through 12, is develop consistency among expectations for the use of technology, consistency also for what we provide as well. So there will be, this refresh cycle will actually provide the consistency through all our buildings.
Yeah.
We are leveling things out
Correct.
Yes.
very soon, if not now.
Yes.
Some of it's, some of it's too, I mean, some of the devices are really, like the one building that has 15, 14-year-old computers. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if that's really a claim to fame. But, we haven't gotten rid of a lot of things, too, so it's accumulation.
And there are some questions I have that, I'm so sorry, Asa, I'm going to put you on the spot, but you're the only one here to answer these questions. What do you see in school, for example? Are the students using their own OneDrive? Do the students and teachers, do you see them having enough support that you think they need? What do you see?
So in terms of OneDrive, do you mean for Office 365?
Yes.
Yeah, so that was actually, we only, as students, learned about this very recently. And I guess some people learned about it more recently than others, but we had a teacher come in and present information on it. And for a lot of students, myself included, I guess we've used Google Drive and Google Docs, so we were pretty easily able to communicate with the teachers through that and each other through that. And it seemed like the OneDrive just provided an alternative means of doing that, just on a different platform. So to us, it didn't seem like there was that much of a point, I guess, just because Google Docs and Google Drive already provided a means of doing that. So we were a bit confused, but there were also some, like the OneNote, the way that it allows you to essentially compile everything in one location. And it does have certain features that Google Docs and Google, I don't know what the Excel version of Google is, but yeah, Google Sheets, thank you, don't have. So the OneDrive is a bit more complex, but for the purposes that we were using it, Google Drive seemed to work fine for us in the past, if that answers the question you were asking.
Do you see any other gaps you see?
Gaps in terms of OneDrive or in terms of technology?
Technology across the board.
Yeah. No, I think the high school in particular has done a very nice job of effectively covering the bases with what we need for technology. And really, what we've needed it most for is the science programs, just because we've used an app called SparkView for a lot of our labs, especially in chemistry and biology, that measures data in a number of different ways. So for that, that's all we've needed. We haven't needed laptops or anything like that. But for students who are less privileged, I can certainly see how laptops would help, especially if they only have a personal computer at home. But for me, I've had more than enough. It's been completely satisfactory.
Thank you.
Sorry, I scribbled all over this. Are we going to talk about this next month, too?
Before you start, I just want to thank you very much. You're so articulate and helpful, so we really appreciate it.
And I appreciate it because I was texting my middle schooler saying, tell me again what you said about OneDrive. So I appreciate, since she didn't get back to me, that we got your input. I had a couple questions, and one of them ties to the consistency issue. And I'm not necessarily saying I advocate a lot of technology use in K through 2 especially, but one of the concerns I had in the goals was goal number 5 talks about allowing educators to evaluate in their own classrooms when and if technology enhances learning. I am all for teacher control and teacher input, but I think that's, you can drive a bus through that gap in enforcing consistent teaching and consistent practices in use of technology. So I just wanted to make sure you guys are on that, you're watching for it, and it doesn't create, a thread of kids who happen to have the teachers who don't want to use technology, and they get to 5th grade or 6th grade, and they haven't been exposed to all these technology expectations that we as a district have had for them.
Agreed. We want to make sure that we have consistency, and we want to make sure, and part of the wording there was also about the discussion we had with the last technology committee was about the appropriate use of technology. I think what has happened, and as you can see by the number of devices that we've had and that we've added, throughout the district, when devices are added, and there's a lot of different reasons why they've been added over the years, sometimes teachers then feel like, oh, I have this, I have to use it. And part of our discussions has been to free our teachers that there is a right time to use technology and there's a time when we don't need, and we need to free them from that. But at the same time, we need to have expectations for what is our expectations for student use and student ability by grade level. And what are the expectations for teachers? And that's where we're beginning this year with those pieces with our learning management system and how we're communicating homeworks and assignments.
Okay. I think only a couple of the goals we're focused on here. Is that just because that's what the team worked on over the summer and spring and summer, Maureen? Mm-hmm. Okay. I did know that. So the year 1 Schoology expectations, that's this school year.
Right, and that's just getting people on the
Okay.
beginning.
Okay. Just so parents can kind of prepare themselves, and I'm speaking for myself, but I'm sure there are a lot of other people. Is the ultimate goal going to be, like, I actually have to check Schoology regularly, and I'm not going to get notices home from the teacher when, for example, they need a permission slip? Like, it talks about, a field trip permission slip may be attached in Schoology.
The goal is to work towards more one-stop shopping, where instead of checking, the website for one student and remind me for another student and, maybe an email for, another issue, that it could become more of a one-stop shopping place. But we do have teachers, particularly at the primary grades, who have never used Schoology before. So we've had it, this is, I believe, our 6th or 7th year with Schoology in the district. So we have some very sophisticated users, and at the primary level, the idea is just, let's get the accounts created, let's start sending out reminders about, bringing your lunch for the field trip, and then we can grow from there as appropriate for the grade level.
Okay.
But we don't envision that, like, kindergartners, 1st grade and 2nd graders are going to be downloading their alphabet homework.
Well, no, and I'm thinking, like, if right now you send home permission slips, do parents have to just kind of know to go look on it on Schoology for it, or will they eventually have to know to go do that?
If they're going to get them on Schoology, they can set up and they'll get an alert.
Okay.
A parent will set up an alert.
I have to figure out how to set up the alerts.
You can come to this session.
I was going to say, I think you need to
night.
make sure you advertise very well that's those sessions at Family Engagement Night, because, I mean, even for people who are tech savvy, it's one more thing they have to do.
So I think we're in the growing pains of this right now, and the feedback I'm hearing from parents as well. So part of what came out of our communications also study was that our parents feel like that we had so many means to, avenues to communicate, and teachers will use different apps, and some teachers using Remind Me, some teachers using a different avenue. So there's a proliferation of all these different ways to use technology to communicate, and each teacher and group is doing different things. And so one of the feedbacks we've heard from the communications aspect and also from our curriculum side has been, how do we streamline this for parents so parents have one-stop shopping? And the realization has been that our Schoology, that learning management system, can be that place. But we're using it differently now for the elementary. It's really just more of an opportunity at the younger years to permission slips, to notify, and there's the growing pains of setting that up. We're hoping that's going to be easier than having teachers who are all using different things to communicate. But we want to continue to gather this feedback and see if this is working. So the reason is to try to make it more streamlined for parents. But I think right now it's appearing like, okay, this is one more thing because it's a new piece for everybody.
And because it's Schoology,
it's building a habit.
Yeah, but Schoology is going to be by definition limited to teachers and faculty administration. So if the PTO is using the Remind app, and I know they're trying to standardize that, I still have to do both the Remind app and Schoology, even though as a parent it's just all school stuff. There's not a way to. Okay. Okay, no, that's, I think, I'm going to get that question. It's now out in
Yeah.
the public.
Well,
People heard the
and
answer.
ultimately, I mean, like I said, there are thousands of features, but there are school pages where things can be pushed out at the school level. They're, at the high school, they have individual groups for graduating classes. And so, there are many different ways that multiple groups can communicate through it, but we don't have
Okay.
any of those things set up at this time.
Okay. Can I ask, because it was referenced in the teacher tiers, what are the OneNote notebooks?
So the OneNote notebooks are part of the interfaces that the students
Part of
could
the Outlook 365?
with Office 365. And this is part of the advantage of having all of our teachers and our students on OneDrive. So if some of my students are on Google Drive and some of them are on OneDrive, and I try to use the features of OneNote to collaborate or whatnot, you can't do that from your Google Drive. It has to be OneDrive to OneDrive. So if I create a document and we're all going to work on it, we all have to be working, through the same source. So again, that idea of that consistency. But again, the same thing with Office 365. I mean, the OneNote and the class notebooks, I mean, the features are just endless. But we're trying to take it one piece at a time. Move to the cloud, use Word, the basics.
Look, I don't
Log
love
in.
OneDrive either, but it is something employers are moving to. And
school districts.
yeah, but it, it goes to your career readiness. It's helpful to understand the technology rather than suddenly having to learn it one year when your company makes a switch. Under support, you talk about PLCS, and I don't know what that is.
So those are the professional learning communities that they have at the high school. And each year, they pick different focus areas depending on what the needs are.
Okay. It seems to me like you guys had to go through and do a really massive inventory of all the schools, and I appreciate that must have been a really large undertaking, so I appreciate it. I guess my question is, was there not a master asset list for these, and is that something you'll be putting into place now to save yourselves the time and effort, and also just as good stewardship?
Yes, one of the things that sort of made this a little easier is that we do keep a pretty good
Okay,
inventory. And it was just, we never showed the inventory this way before.
Okay.
So we wanted to reorganize it in a way that we can, at a glance, really be able to see what the age of the hardware was that we had.
Okay. Those are my notes on what you got. I asked, so you were saying that most of these devices, the devices in this inventory were actually purchased by the district. We believe they weren't or they may have been also grants from some other
Purchased by the
outside-
district, and then actually Tony just sent me a message to remind me that when we first got iPads, we did have PTOs
I thought I remembered that.
purchasing iPads too. So
Right, and and if I can also add, Maureen made a really good point about the ACTS program. The ACTS program ran for several years, and it was a group of teachers, about 20 at a time, that would participate each year. And at the end of their participation, some may have gotten a class set of iPads, some may have gotten a class, well, not a class set, but like 10 iPads for their class, or 10 laptops for their class. So that did add up to the numbers of equipment. And one of the real amazing things is that people still remember that, and so they're thinking, well, my iPad is too old now. Am I going to get a new one to replace it? Well, the answer is likely no, because we're really looking in a different direction. That's something that happened several years ago. So, and while that program was very good and instrumental with getting us from like nothing in the classroom years ago to really building the capacity now over years, it served us really well. But, we're at a point now that we can take a much different look as how we move forward.
Okay. So are we in the process, if we move to this, let's just assume the refresh cycle and what we end up proposing in terms of student to device ratios all works out by grade, are we getting rid of things like the desktops that are in computer labs in the schools, or in the pods, maybe in RES or other common spaces? I mean, are we really just going to clear out?
We would work towards eliminating duplication,
Okay.
Where it's appropriate.
Okay.
Which is the advantage of having, the touchscreen, the tablet, the keyboard. You don't. I was telling Byron, I was in a science class the other day, and the students had an iPad to do their science experiment, and then they had a laptop where they were typing up the lab. So, one student, two devices. We want to get away from that.
I do that at home.
Yeah.
So the other question, and it's kind of the converse of what we noticed in terms of the student ratios, it seems like the Radnor teachers and staff have significantly more devices. Is there a reason And are we moving towards, I heard you mention that teachers like having an iPad and a laptop. Are we trying to push them all to one device? I know that doesn't always work for some of their needs. And the same for staff, I guess, are we?
Well, our primary teachers will probably need to have an iPad or at least access the ones in the cart because their students will be working on iPads.
Right.
But we're going to be eliminating as many of those as we can as we go to the full service workstations at the high school and even to the Chromebooks.
Okay, and desktops as well? Okay.
Yeah, we should, even in the libraries and whatnot, we really shouldn't need those because we can use Chromebooks, you know, $360 Chromebook just as easily to do the same job.
Okay. Is there a reason in the Radnor High School and then also in the district-wide that we didn't include the staff devices, or was it just an oversight in the numbers? So if you look at the high school, it just says, it may actually include, it doesn't seem like there are any staff devices at Radnor High School.
Oh, you're right.
Which seemed
You know,
strange.
you are right about that.
And then when you
Yeah,
combine
you
the
know.
no, but it says just teacher devices at the top. And then I didn't see any of the little staff bars.
You know, when you look at the volume, it could be that, and I'm not sure. I'm going to have to go
No,
back
that's-
to the actual larger chart that depicts this. When you look at the range from like 0 to 800, I'm wondering if it's because staff devices are so few that it probably didn't register.
Okay.
Because it is on the legend. So I'm thinking that
It's on the legend, yeah, but then it didn't get added, like the number up above the 417 just says teacher devices. And in every other chart, it says teacher and staff.
Okay.
And I noticed it again in the district. I actually had noticed it in the district-wide. It looks like it really, that 940 does exclude staff.
Yeah.
But again, maybe it's because of the legend, because I see them at the bottom.
Right. Yeah. Because
But I don't know that they're in that number. It just
Right,
seems
yeah,
strange.
because at the last chart that shows the total district, you see that little spackling of green there that shows the staff for the 1 and 2 and 3-year-old, and actually down to the 5-year-old devices.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
see it, but it doesn't,
But-
when I added up the numbers on the others, it's more
does,
than
it's not
940,
showing.
so that's why I
Okay.
just wondered if there was a reason in our thinking that.
No.
Okay. I heard the ratio that we think we're talking about for K to 12 for iPad carts is probably one iPad for every 2 students. I didn't hear, I think it sounded like you guys are still working, I'm sorry, K to 2. For 3 to 8, did we have a proposal, or is that one of the things we're still looking at?
The Chromebook carts, we're going to have to talk more about that, and it's
Okay.
really going to depend on what those expectations are, particularly at the elementary level. I mean, right now, we have so many that,
Okay.
I think we need to keep some usage reports and look at some of those things. And we need to have a larger discussion, particularly at the middle school, because of the way the middle school is structured with the teams and the pods and things like that. It really lends itself to fairly easy use of things like carts. But yet we bought Chromebooks for the science department this year, and, that was 425 Chromebooks. So if we bought the social studies department next year and bought another 400, well, now we have over 800.
Right.
We have one for every student, and now there are none in English language arts and, the other content areas.
Right, but at the same time, if you're offering social studies and science in the same period, you're going to need double the laptops, so,
Right.
or double the Chromebooks.
Right, or the students have them.
Or they go
Right,
one-to-one.
they may just be.
Yeah.
That might be a more efficient way, and that's part of the pilot and part of the discussion we have to have.
Yeah.
What does it look like? What is the model K2? What is the model in 3, 4, and 5? And then what is the model in 6 to 8? And that's where we need to have continued discussion. And really, we need to look at, first and foremost, educationally. What is making sense educationally? We have the number of devices now. It wouldn't make sense to be I would argue against duplicating and having that many, but then we need to talk about then what does that model look like, and that's going to be a discussion we'll have as we watch this pilot.
Okay.
Yeah, because you wouldn't want them carrying them around if they weren't using them either.
Right, right. So the Chromebooks, I mean, you make a good case for how durable they are and kind of all the different options and bells and whistles. I guess my question is, why is that not a full-service laptop for like 9 to 12? I feel like we in the past have talked about an Apple product, and I know we hadn't finalized that, but I guess I'm just wondering.
We did at the high school. We wanted the full service workstation because we want students to have access to the full Microsoft suite.
And that doesn't come with the Chromebook?
Now it's only everything is web based. So
None of it's actually on the device.
It's not on the device.
That's very helpful to understand.
Yeah,
Okay.
so they're not, they're using not Google Sheets, but they're going to be using Office 365. They'll be using the web-based version. There are fewer features. You can't save anything on the machine. Some of the products that the high school uses with some of the students, some of the software pieces for curricular areas, online textbooks, some of those things are still pushed out as software. We have a self-service center right now at the high school where our teachers are downloading the software they need on their new devices and beta testing them to make sure that everything's going to work when the students get the devices next year.
Okay, so conversely, are the Chromebooks less expensive than the full-service laptops, that it makes sense to be doing those? Okay, just making sure.
So we're
I assume you guys
total
are
cost of
looking at that,
ownership at $360.
Okay.
So it's
I got it.
So we went over that kind of in the spring, right? Where we did kind of come to a conclusion about the high school. And so that remains the same, right?
the full service
okay,
workstation, yes,
yeah.
with the
We're
parent
just reviewing.
contribution.
Got it.
Right.
Yeah, no, that's very helpful.
And with the parent contribution, that keeps the cost really at both levels about the same, right around that 350
Right.
area.
Right, you remember all that.
Yeah,
okay.
yes.
It's a lot.
I was
We
paying
do have a couple information sessions set up. I know some of you are going to PSBA next week, but I set up a couple next week if you
No,
want
it's
to
this
come.
week, so-
Oh, it's this week.
Yeah,
Oh, it's
PSBA
this
is this
week.
week.
We have them this week. So if you'd like to come in and talk more about it, and I will set up another one. I have to talk to Byron. We'll set up another one for the following week for folks that aren't in town. So if you want to come and look at more of the numbers or talk more about it, we'll be happy to do that.
Sure.
Okay. The only other point, and Chuck raises a good point, it's not savings, it's money we may have already budgeted and we're not going to spend. But I know Ms. Bunberger, I've both raised issues about the subsidy of the laptops in the high school, and actually we've raised issues about the fact that we're asking so much of a contribution from the students' parents. And I wonder whether that money would be well spent or well set aside to help at least less privileged students with their purchase of full-service laptops in the high school.
Yeah.
And not that we don't have a very generous community, but rather than rely on the kindness of strangers, making sure we have a backup plan.
A lot more discussions to be had. Thank you.
Thank you, and I appreciate all your answers.
Yeah, I really like the way you're looking at this. I mean, technology, it's just been a little inconsistent, the expenditures from year to year. So this is very nice, sort of the way this is flowing. So thank you, Dr.
Thank you.
McCook.
Thanks, Byron. All right, so we're going to jump right into writing. So we have our two teachers patiently waiting.
We took a picture of you. We took your picture, you'll find it on there. A little gift.
It may not work.
We're always happy to have you here.
Good sports. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. So we're happy to provide you an update on the work we've been doing with the writing K through 12 at the end of last year and what we're looking forward to doing this year. And as you see, we have two teachers here who might be able to answer some questions you have if it's specific to classroom instruction or that sort of thing. So we're now on the writing update. And you can see from the top of the first full page there that our goal is to support students' development as writers by refining our instructional practices to facilitate high-quality writing across disciplines. A couple things worth pointing out there. One of them is that our focus is on refining instructional practices. We aren't looking to get a K-12 writing program. We're not looking at buying specific materials. We're looking at really helping to improve and continue to develop writing instruction. When we talk about high-quality writing across disciplines, though, there's also the realization that we have to have some common understanding of what high-quality writing is, and that's something that's going to be an ongoing process, not just within grade levels, but across grade levels as well. And then similarly across disciplines. This is not easy, but we are starting to take a look this year primarily English language arts and social studies, but seeing where we can go from there in future years as well. Some of the work that we did last year to help us work towards this were to develop K-12 writing principles. When we knew we wanted to go take a look at writing, which came out of the English language arts curriculum audit from 2 years ago, and is now part of the district goals for this year, we realized that it would be important for us to have some common understanding of what we meant by high-quality writing, and we wanted to take a look and see what did the educational research suggest were best practices when it came to writing. And that document, the Teaching and Learning Principles here, helps to reflect some broad descriptions of what we're looking for writing K through 12. And this is a document that was developed with lots of input from instructional coaches, literacy specialists, and certainly teachers, primarily ELA teachers at the secondary level, but teachers across the board at the elementary level. These are hopefully specific enough that they give us some guidance for what it is we're working for, but broad enough that allows for a lot of individuality when it comes to not only the teachers, but meeting the needs of specific students as well. Another document that we developed last year to also try and be much more specific, though, about what it was that we were trying to accomplish with writing at different grade levels is this scope and sequence document. This was when we worked off of some work done by Patan, but we made sure that our teachers looked at this and had input to make sure, does this reflect what it is that we're trying to accomplish grade level to grade level? And it's useful for our teachers to both see not only what they might be responsible for the grade levels they teach, but what is it that students should be entering their grade level, having at least been introduced to, if not secured, and where is it that they're going from there. So we realized that although this is grade level expectations based on the PA course standards, students are going to be at different places within any classroom. Some students are likely to be writing above grade level, others perhaps a little bit below grade level, but this can help our teachers make decisions about developing them from wherever they are. You also see highlighted in green are those items that are assessed on the PSSA, and in gray those items that are assessed on the Keystone exam, so that it gives some decision-making power for what is most important, perhaps for our teachers to focus on, because there's a lot to do in any one class, not just with the LA, but across the board. And this is going to help them have a better sense of what it is that's being assessed at each grade level. Again, our teachers were pretty well aware of this, but it's kind of nice to have it in one place and to see what it might look like across grades as well. But realizing that the focus is on instruction, we also wanted to think about what professional development we were offering our teachers. One of the primary forms of professional development on an individual basis and with grade level teams and departments is through our instructional coaches. But we also wanted to partner with an outside organization that had particular expertise in this area. So at the end of the last year, we took a look and invited in a few different organizations that provide professional development on writing. And we decided to work with the Pennsylvania Writing and Literature Project, PULP, out of Westchester University. They were terrific when they came in and met with us. They were very knowledgeable not only about writing instruction, but also the programs that we currently have in place in our district. What they saw as both the strengths and weaknesses. And we were impressed because they were a lot of the strengths and weaknesses that we had already identified for ourselves. So it seemed like they'd be able to sort of hit the ground running and know where some of those things were that we would have to focus on. At the same time, they're very responsive to working with us to make sure that what they were delivering for us was what we were looking for, and going back and forth with even agendas and whatnot for trainings that we've already had this year. So we're working with them. We also did some work at our elementary level with our English Language Arts Committee, and NISA was part of that, looking at our benchmark assessments, which are some standard writing pieces that our students do across grade levels at the elementary level, as well as updating the rubric that we're using to evaluate those. At the high school, when we were thinking about writing, one of the things that they would like to focus on is taking a look at what's called Feedback Studio through Turnitin. Most people may know better as a previous version of it as Turnitin, which was a plagiarism checker and originality checker. But this one looks like it's going to allow us to not only do that, but also perhaps facilitate more feedback to students, and perhaps even consistent feedback across the department. But we'll learn more as we take a look at that this year. But that's something that the high school department wanted to look at, and we are planning to do. If you've taken a look through the action plan, you can see that we've started some of this, as I mentioned already, with professional development that we put in place in August. And then moving forward, we are going to want to try and look at Feedback Studio a little bit more closely, set up some model lessons, trying to schedule some model lessons for our teachers on writing instruction with PULP, and also looking and taking a look at what are our writing benchmarks and written language assignments at the middle school, and how are we evaluating those, how are we assessing those, how are we providing feedback to student on those, as well as seeing, to what extent does the Writers' Workshop model really work in the with the curriculum we have in place, the time that we have in place, and where, going forward, might we need to make some adjustments so that it's not just on paper, but really happening for our students and teachers in the classroom. And we see this work continuing certainly into the summer and probably beyond that. So that's sort of an overview of where we are and where we're going. We'd be happy to take questions that you have, either for me or the teachers.
I have some, but good news, far fewer than I did on the tech study. I guess I was happy to, I mean, it looks like you guys really have this under control. One thing I would suggest you consider is ways that you can get parents involved in a lot of this. I know I'm seeing in, 4th and 5th grade, teachers asking you to have your homework signed, writing assignments signed. And it's helpful to parents to understand what level we should be expecting from our students at that age. And I'm not saying you expect your parents to be teachers, but you can certainly use a lot of them as assistants, right? So I don't want to discourage a student from writing by correcting things that are perfectly acceptable at that age level. But by the same token, if there are things that are a problem and I need to help focus on at home, rather than every parent coming into a parent-teacher conference and demanding that information, to the extent it's something you can provide generally, even just back-to-school night. I think some teachers do this at the parent-teacher conferences, but if it's something you can even just make available in Schoology, that might be helpful. The writing workshop, writing and literature project, that looks great. The Turnitin Feedback Studios, it's just the high school. Was there any interest from the middle school? Is it not something they think they need? Is it something we think would be beneficial?
The interest came from the high school, and I think we want to start one step at a time. Okay. I'm not going to speak for the middle school if there's interest or not, but that's not what our focus is right now.
Okay.
I'm sure that people would think about it, right? I think, for the most part right now, they're not maybe, middle school students as sophisticated in their acquiring of things, so it's kind of easy to tell.
It's easier to spot the plagiarism.
Right, it is. Usually the writing style is really, really different.
Okay.
And so it's pretty easy.
Because one of the reasons I asked is this focuses on it being MacBook compatible. I assume it would also be Chromebook compatible and PC. Okay. The last one, what talks about professional development for individual teachers and teams, and I guess I just wanted to make sure, are we doing professional development for all teachers in the affected courses? Is the administration responsible for identifying specific teachers who need it? Are we doing it just kind of whoever raises their hand?
The PAL professional development that's taken place so far has been for all K through 5 classroom teachers, and that's what started in August, as well as 6th through 8 social studies and English teachers. And those are the teachers who will be the primary focus with our in-service days. The individual teacher and team professional development comes from our instructional coaches, and that happens a variety of different ways. Okay. It could be a teacher asking them for assistance of one kind or another. That happens often. It could be someone being identified. And very often it's that our instructional coaches have rotating scheduled meetings with different grade level teams, so they're kind of talking with everyone on a regular basis.
Okay, sounds great. I guess the last thing, how do you all intend to gauge the success of this?
I think we need to look at some of the same things that got us into this in the first place. Really where it came from, I think, and Maureen was the one who led the audit, but I think where a lot of it came from the audit was what were our teachers telling us and what were our parents telling us as the needs that they perceived. We've already heard, or I've already heard, but they can tell you, as far as what they thought as far as writing being an area of focus over the past few years, the need that it should be more of an area of focus. So hopefully after we've put some time and effort in this, they feel like we've given it a good amount of attention. They feel more secure in what they're doing, and they also feel like we have a system in place and a structure in place that supports them in supporting our students in high-quality writing. When we look at more harder data, I think the places that we would go to kind of see scores, if there were anything that we'd be looking at, might be the PSSA ELA test, but more specifically our benchmark assessments, because they're most directly aligned with our curriculum and our instruction. But again, we're trying to tune those up, come up with some anchor papers so we can increase the likelihood of consistency in grading. But that's some of the data over the longer term we might be able to look at to see what are we seeing from our students in the writing they're producing. I don't know.
Well, yeah, so what he said, right? But
Perfect, I knew
I
it.
think really the biggest thing is we're trying to use our counterpart time.
Okay.
You know, in middle school at least, we have a few counterpart days. We're really trying to look at that in a curricular standpoint. Where do we see writing really being embedded? Where does it feel like it's an add-on? And trying to figure out how to not make it an add-on, right? So that it's just a natural occurrence within. And we know that a lot of that organic writing is occurring in the schools. It's just making it known to the student that there's a reason why they're doing it, right? So I think a lot of students are writing and thinking, oh, I didn't do any writing today, but in reality, they did. So it's just making it a little bit more purposeful. As a side note, we'll be using OneNote in 6th grade for our communication among the teachers. That's one way we're using it right now is the counterparts have a OneNote, and we put different ideas in there in one section, PSSA standards, those types of things are all in there. So hopefully combining a whole bunch of things that are going on right now into that.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Thanks.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Matt.
I guess my question goes back to, and I don't know whether you were here at the time, but we used to have a storytelling grant where we brought storytellers into the middle school.
We have done cultural arts grants, yeah. So that
Okay.
was a while back.
Yeah, this was a while. But my point is, and there is some research out there that shows that part of the reason our students are having difficulty with writing is they're having difficulty with speaking, with the language itself, talking to each other, communicating. And I guess my point is, as we move through this, I think it would be invaluable for us to look at what we're doing in our pre-K, K, in developing the minds of our students so that they can talk with each other, they can tell a story. Just a simple thing as, what did you do in school is actually a story. It's a moment that you're turning in and sharing with your words, and then all we're doing later is adding the ability to write it down. And I think for a lot of times we're spending too much time, this is just my opinion, okay? And there are others out there actually, that we're working on the mechanics of something without the students understanding what they're supposed to be trying to do. So I would like to see us make sure that we're dealing with that piece. And that goes not only to the regular education, but to the special education, where sometimes it's much more difficult to do the writing piece, but they might be able to tell a story very well. I know, just as a sidelight, in my class, we had scribes that would work with our kids. So they'd be able to write a story, but they weren't the ones writing it. They were actually telling the story. And I know in the past, because she was from media, the person that was over the middle school. Now, this probably was a while ago. And they did projects where they wrote stories based upon Wayne, actually, and they did some historical things where they went around. They tied a lot of it together, because when we say we're going to teach our kids how to write differently, persuasively, this way and that way, let's begin to let them understand what are some of the reasons why we're doing that, and that comes way back in your classrooms.
I told Jim I would try to do a good job just sitting here and smiling, but I'm very...
So far, so good.
I was doing really well. So a couple of things. One of the things I also wanted to mention was, how is it going to be measured? So we have to do these specific learning objectives, and so most of us have chosen writing this year, so we have certain targets that we have to meet. And what's really great in the elementary school is that we have the coaches, and the coaches come in and meet with us with our grade level teams and help us look at what we're doing with the writing instruction. Now, Mr. Madden's going to be really excited about this part. You're going to love it. You're going to want to come in and visit again. I love when you come in. So, our writing program, each of our lessons start off with us reading from text. And, like, I guess it's like the storyteller in some ways. I'm sorry, I wasn't around at that time. But 1999. So in any case, we begin our lessons with this mini lesson of reading that type of story. And a lot of our lessons have what's called a turn and talk in it. So the children do practice that type of storytelling. So I'm so excited that is so exciting to you, and I'm so glad that because we're very excited about it in the elementary school, and we're really excited. I'll speak for myself. I'm very excited that we're making your vision happen in the elementary school.
There you go.
Come on in.
And we use something very similar called mentor text. So when you're teaching a specific writing, you use a mentor text to work from. So we're looking at how people use language, not necessarily where they put the commas and the periods, because they don't put them. And also we try as we can to get authors in. So in the middle school recently, we've had 2 authors visits. We started off the year with an authors visit, and there was another one right in the middle, and they talk about their time with the writing process to try to get kids to understand that even professional writers have to get edits. They get all these things back, lots of feedback about their writing. So by the time it's middle school, it's more like the stamina to actually withstand like writing it and then having it come back and having to rewrite it.
One more. So
right
one
ahead.
of the things that I think Jim has made very clearly in our time of the ELAC committee, it's that it's not prescribed how we teach it. It's very much, what do your children need? Here are the things that need to be done. So I'm just going to give an example where I feel as a teacher I have some leeway as long as I'm covering what the state standards are. So for narrative nonfiction, I happen to be very fortunate. The parents of one of my students is an author. So I had her come in with all of her drafts and the finished product. And so now every Friday, my students, because there's a part in here where, like Pop also said, how important it is for the children to have ownership and choose their subjects. So they're choosing a subject to write a narrative nonfiction like this author did. And it was just an organic process. And basically from that, allowing the teachers to have some latitude, but as you can tell, we definitely have a framework and a structure. Oh, sorry, one more thing. And I know, I'm sorry. And I was really practicing just smiling and sitting here. The other part of it is that the PAW people especially, and because we all got the same message, that the students need to be writing every day. And like Terry said, it happens in every subject area. But for the elementary school, it's so important just to let them write. Here's your writer's notebook. They say use a pen, because this way we can track what they're doing and saying it's okay to revise and change your thoughts. Almost every classroom that I know of, they advise that we skip lines, so there's places for their revisions. So I think you'll find that there's just amazing things happening. I'm going to guess in the middle school and high school too, but I can speak to the elementary school.
Ms. Boniver, any questions on this?
Well, I was going to, but Anissa took my time. I'm just kidding. It was a pleasure listening to you. It really was. No questions.
I have just 2, I hope these are real quick. So this sparked me wondering, when we were talking about the Turnitin, the plagiarism piece, when do you teach them how to do proper footnoting? Like, where does that come in the whole writing?
So a lot of it happens actually through at least in middle school, through library. Is where a lot of it happens, because they start using noodle tools and so forth like that. And so back in the dark ages, evidently, when I was around, and you used to have to kind of keep a note and then type them in at the bottom. This program, they just put in their source, the citation they want to use, and it formats it all for them.
Oh my gosh, you're kidding.
So
you don't actually learn you're not formatting your own footnotes anymore?
Yeah, I only learned to footnote last year for Model UN. Before, I knew how to cite for MLA, but I'd never.
No, he's on.
I'd never known how to footnote until last year. I needed
Because
to.
the computer did it for you.
No, like we were never required to include footnotes.
Right.
See,
So
okay.
it's more for us the citing the sources, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
so,
we don't do that in elementary school, but they do learn how to do a bibliography.
Right.
Okay.
yeah, they start using Noodle tools at the elementary level and learn about
Okay.
citations there.
I was just really curious about that piece. And I had one other thing with regard to the rubric. So in my former life, I'm going to keep this short, I was involved in scoring writing tests based on a rubric. And everything sort of used to tend to the mean. Like, it was really hard to construct a rubric where you could really get a distribution of 1 to 6. I assume you're using 1 to 6. How are you working with, how are you making this usable so that everybody's not a 4.5?
So
Like,
we use tuning protocols, hopefully. Like we've done that before with well, we're going to go back to like the RTSD type rubric. So you bring teachers in on one of those days, those in-service days, and we have what we consider high. Everybody brings a high, medium, weaker paper with them, and you kind of just mix them up, and then everybody reads them, and as you go around, you just kind of score, and then you see where things end up. So everybody has kind of an idea of what are we thinking is exemplary, what's proficient, and what's still like maybe experiencing some difficulty. So it's kind of more of a holistic approach.
Okay.
So I think sometimes what you're getting at is, you have 6 different columns. How do you decide this column is a 5 when this column is a 3? And that just comes from that communication piece.
so are you finding after the in-service that people are more in agreement on what a 5 or a 6 is? And, I mean, is there actual?
Well, yeah, I would say our in-service hasn't focused on that
Okay.
yet.
Okay.
In the past, they have done that.
Yeah.
This year, that has not been a focus, but we are working towards starting at the elementary level and some conversations at the middle school level.
I think I have a document related to this. Keep talking, I'll be right with you.
But that's how, right? And,
Yeah,
and I
that's
think
helpful.
the other key point of rubrics is making sure there's a companion to the rubric that's written in kid language, right, if you will. So a lot of
Okay.
times rubrics are written for adults to circle, and when you give the students a rubric to look at, it's written in that language, and it really doesn't have a lot of meaning to them. So to whatever level they might be working, having that same rubric in language that would be more complementary to them is also quite useful.
Okay, that's helpful.
So we have this document, and I'll pass it over for the elementary school, and it breaks down each of the categories on the rubric to
Okay.
be more specific about what to look for, because I think you've seen the one-pager
That's what I'm
document.
thinking.
So we
Yeah.
all have these that we also cross-reference.
Okay. So you've got a much more detailed, I would love to see that. Okay. I am so delighted that we're focusing on writing. It's like, it's one of the things that can fall through the cracks because it's not so easy to assess and it's not an actual subject, if you will, So, well, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It's not like,
I'm just
it's not
thinking
like
in my mind, people just heard
algebra.
that and they're gonna- it's all good.
Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's not
yeah,
like So, this is great. I mean, and I love your enthusiasm. And so we just need to keep this push. Like, we need to keep this focus on writing because that's one thing our students absolutely need to know how to do.
Well, and I really appreciate that you recognize that it's not just the ELA teachers' jobs to teach writing. Because my kids have come home at various points and said, and why did my social studies teacher mark this? I mean, it's not like this is my English class. I said, actually, writing focuses on all, writing is important in all areas of life, and you need to know how to do that. And I get the big eye roll, but it's helpful to have it reinforced at school. I think that's great.
This is great. Where'd you get this? Did we write?
We get a literacy packet at the beginning of each school year,
Okay.
also math as well. And so our curriculum directors give us the information, and then each grade level is expected to meet with our coaches in our building, and we go through it. Plus, it's also done in the whole group meeting as well. So every teacher in the elementary level has that.
Awesome. Good work, team. This is wonderful.
And I do want to say thank you for your support. And Jim actually did say that I could say as much as I want.
I love you.
Jim.
You guys need to take that show on the road.
Like that.
All right, thank you
Thank
so
you very much for your expertise and your smiles.
And I think you were one of my nephew's favorite teachers.
Thank you.
So it looks like we're going to have to save our conversation about social studies until another day. Just a quick reminder that, thank you, Anissa, thank you, Terry. We do have our session, anybody wants to talk more about technology, tomorrow at noon, and then another one on the 19th at 9 a.m., and I'll send out a date for next week for folks that are away. I don't know if we got to talk about, we do have a textbook adoption. I want to make sure we get on the agenda, the novel for ninth grade integrated.
Yeah,
We didn't ever approve.
we're going to approve it at the business meeting.
At the business meeting.
And I have to give a plug for it. I've read it. I read it
Great.
last year. It's wonderful. I'm delighted they found it. And
Well, it'll
I
be in the
want that.
superintendent's office until the board meeting. If anybody wants to
should
take a look at it or borrow it or read the, you read it tonight. There we go. All right.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
So I just need to say before we do public comment that at our next business meeting, which will be, our next curriculum committee meeting, which will be November 13th, we're going to be having a long discussion with sort of the preliminary results of the sleep study,
Adolescent
correct?
sleep,
So
right.
I wanted to just get that out in the public.
And committee of the whole, right?
Yes, and that will
Yes.
be a committee of the whole. Okay. So are you guys
That's all we can cram in.
here? Yeah. Excellent work, though. I mean, you know, it's all so important. Any new business? Committee? Okay. That brings us to our second round of public comment. Is there any public comment at this time?
Susan Stern, one of those not awkward, but just, it's one of those comments I want to make. With regard to the writing program that is so important, one of the pieces, Sarah kind of touched on it in a backwards way in that she was talking about having parents at home be partners in understanding what the rubrics are in terms of what we might expect children at different ages to to be able to write. One of the pieces of feedback that I not only experienced as a parent, and I didn't see it addressed in the writing initiative, so I'm concerned it still isn't getting addressed, is it's very seldom that students are given their written work back after it's been graded by a teacher, and then to bring home for parents to see the feedback that the student is getting from their teacher. Even if they have to bring it back the next day. It's not very frequent, unless this has changed dramatically, and a couple of you with kids in the middle school and high school can speak to this. There was a time when kids just didn't get back their written work at the high school or in the middle school. It was held in a folder that then, the portfolio, the holy grail that couldn't come home and have parents see the work that their kids are doing, but more importantly, or just as important, seeing the feedback that their English teachers or their social studies teachers are giving them about their written work. And my personal opinion is that our ability, at least for parents to partner with kids or partner with the schools and being a component of, writing, I'm not saying parents should be doing the writing, don't get me wrong, but parents often ask, what is my kid writing? What does the teacher think? How are they doing? And seeing that written work and the feedback from it and seeing the editing process going back and forth between a student and a teacher is a pretty important component of that. So again, maybe that's changed since my kids were in school. I didn't see it in the initiative, and that was definitely an issue from the parent side. So I share that as a piece of feedback.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Judy Sherry, and on that note, also related to the comment that Ms. Dunn made, 25 years ago when students were in Watershed, a weekly progress report came home. It was written by, the student would do sort of a self-evaluation. The teacher would add their comments to it, and then it was up to the parents to read that and write back, again, what the parent thought of the weekly report. But I do think something like that, where also the parent is modeling behavior and modeling writing, and the child knows it's about the work that the child did, is very effective in involving all three components, which are important: the student, the teacher, and the parent. And then two other items. Ms. Solomon mentioned the sleep recommendations. I'm wondering, will the full board be voting on the sleep recommendations start time in November after the curriculum meeting? It seems that for planning purposes for the next year, or wouldn't it be, maybe I'll ask it as a question, wouldn't it be better to make this decision sooner than later? And finally, related to the calendar, will Penn Medicine's development impact the bus schedule for next year? Does the district have a timeline for this development, and perhaps any interruption it might cause our buses? Maybe some sort of coordination could be developed with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sherry. I think it is appropriate to say that we will not be voting on that in November, Judy. I think maybe other people in the community have that question as well. We're going to loop back to it in February, probably.
Whoops. Cindy Spurtle, Wayne, correction on the organizational chart. That was June of 17 that was referred to in the answer, not of this past year on the original organizational chart. So job descriptions were passed out a year ago, and wondering if you received some from the new positions. I had one other question which caught my eye, bringing up the integrated programs that Doug Kent had brought up in the minutes from last month, that they're going to evaluate the optimal participation in these programs. I wanted to ask whether that evaluation would be done prior to the date for the sign-up of the programs for next year, so that whatever is learned can be added to, since they are such popular programs, maybe even doubling up on a couple of the, especially Watershed, from what I understand. A question on the professional development, and going through the, listening to the explanation on Schoology and the training on the new systems and programs by the, is there a standardization? I know there are all teachers. Are they evaluated on the use of Schoology? Is it part of the evaluation so that all teachers would start to use it, would sign up for using that to make it a more standardized across the board for everyone in the school, the teachers and the staff? And I also had a question based on Asa's comment on the Google, the use of the Google data programs that you use. Is there any concern with security of the data? I mean, from what we've been hearing lately on Google, knowing absolutely everything there is to know about us, is the transfer over to a new program any concern with the safety and security of the students? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Spurtle. Is there any other public comment? Seeing none, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you so much.